So we have a guest teacher tonight, Shel Fischer, and some of you know her. You have sat with her on a day long. I see several of you nodding your head, or maybe been on retreat with her as the teacher. So we welcome Shel tonight from Mindful Shenandoah over in the valley. And Shel and I actually met, what did we figure, about 20 years ago, maybe. We were we were both enrolled in John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness-based stress reduction program at UMass. So we met there, and she has continued her education and her training as a teacher um, with Tara Brach in Washington and at Naropa University. So we are honored to have you here tonight. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm grateful for Therese for inviting me. I haven't seen you for so long. It was lovely to see you. Grateful to be here. 2 hour drive. It was lovely. Um, so I like to offer us a meditation to start, and then I'm going to be offering us a talk on finding peace in the chaos. I think is a good topic right now. So uh, maybe just invite you all as you're ready to settle. And welcome to those online. I hope you can hear me. A little closer? That that better? Yep. Okay. So whenever you're ready, just settle, close the eyes. Maybe right away, just take a nice deep inhale, filling up the lungs. Slow exhale, let go. Just to start to get in touch with the body. Might take a couple of rounds of those on your own. To settle and arrive here after a long day or wherever you've traveled from, allowing yourself to be with the body and to settle, and allowing the breath to help you with that, especially on the exhale, just letting go. Whenever you're ready, you can let go of any control of the breath and just let the body breathe and notice the body breathing. And if there's still some control, no worries at all. Just noticing each inhale and each exhale. Right away, you also might bring the foundation, what is considered the foundation of our practice, right here, the soil of our practice, which is metta, loving kindness. And we start with ourselves. And what's helpful for this is just to bring a very, very slight smile to the corner of the eyes and the lips, or just a sense of a smile here. Never ever as a way to cover over anything, to paint a smiley face on. You're inviting friendliness, like you're inviting the kindest being you know to just be here with you. That sense of, I'm right here with whatever's happening in the mind, body, heart. I'm right here. Allowing whatever's here in the mind, body, heart with kindness and gentleness, which is another root meaning of the word metta, gentle. And as we're gentle with the heart and ourselves, we might also start inviting a gentleness in the body, a softening and opening, a letting go. So you might start to notice the body and see what you can soften. You might start at the top of the head and see if you can imagine the skin at the top of the head just softening. all around the skull, allowing the forehead to be smooth, eyes soft in their socket, all the little muscles in the face melting, teeth slightly parted so the jaw can relax, still aware of the breath, maybe aware of the breath right at the nostril as the breath is received, and then there's the letting go. You might bring your awareness to the neck and shoulders. See if you can drop the shoulders. Maybe filling this area with your awareness like you're filling a dry sponge with water, letting there be a little more space. And if there's tightness or tension, you offer again a sense of gentleness here, kindness, letting go. You might drop your awareness, your attention down into the torso. Noticing the breath here, maybe right at the chest. So sensing the expansion and contraction of the rib cage, front, side, and back. Maybe even sensing it from the nostrils down through the throat into the chest and back. And you follow that whole flow of the breath. Maybe on each exhale, inviting even more letting go, dropping in, aware of the body. You might even now bring your awareness all the way down into the belly. It may be very subtle, it's okay. See if you can sense that gentle rise and fall of the abdomen like a little balloon in the belly. Allowing the belly to be undefended like a 2-year-old's belly. Just very naturally receiving the breath and letting go. And maybe you can follow it again all the way through from the nostrils, throat, chest, belly, and back. Noticing the body breathing. You might become aware of the hands. See if you can soften the very center of the palms, and opening the hands, whether they're open up towards the sky or down on the thighs, or even one holding one in the other. Can you allow your hands to be in a gesture of both receiving and letting go, really softening and opening the hand. And then letting that sense of receiving and letting go flow through the whole body. Imagine that, an opening, a flow of each moment being received and each moment passing and then being received again. Really noticing your aliveness in this moment. You might become aware now of your sit bones and sense the weight of your body being held by the earth, which has always held you and always will. And allow yourself to sink down into that support of the earth. Maybe sense yourself connected to the earth as if your feet had roots that went all the way down to the center of the earth, connecting you to all things. Imagine that. From your sit bones, you might sense the whole length of the spine rising all the way up to the top of the head like a flower reaching up towards the sun, allowing the spine to be not too tight, not too loose, just like the stem of a flower, alive, flexible, awake. Maybe sensing all the muscles around the skeleton softening a bit around the skeleton. Aware of the body in this moment as a whole, breathing, alive, sensing. Aware of a rising and passing sound inside this room and out. Aware of temperature, places of coolness and warmth in the body. Might even again notice the breath and see if there's a place where the breath most naturally wants to land. What's home for the breath? So it could be the full breath, be a sense of the body expanding and contracting, or it could be a place along the breath, nostrils, throat, chest, belly. Where is it for you? Where's home for the breath? And you've discovered that place, that home, that anchor. Let it be the place that you return to again and again, gently, with kindness. Each time you notice that the mind has wandered away into story, narrative, thinking, fantasy, very kindly and gently, just bring it back home to the body and the breath, and begin again with being present in the body right here. Thoughts may still be arising and passing, but when we're present and embodied, we're simply noticing thinking is happening. No judgment, just being curious with our awareness about what is happening right now. It's like this. Without adding more story or rejecting, chewing on, judging, ruminating, going with. And simply aware of whatever's happening with kindness, curiosity, and gentleness. And if you've forgotten the soil of our practice, you might invite it in at any time again, bringing in a sense of metta with a sense of a smile maybe at the corner of the eyes or the lips. Invite metta in. Sit together in this way in silence for the next 6 minutes or so, 6 to 8. Maybe noticing where the mind is now. And if you've become distracted with thinking, no worries. Very gently bring yourself back home to the breath and begin again. And so with the eyes still closed, just listening to these words from the poet Naraya Wahid, who tells us, you do not have to be a fire for every mountain blocking you. You could be a water and soft river your way to freedom too. You do not have to be a fire for every mountain blocking you. You could be a water and soft river your way to freedom too. I thought, again, given the time in our history that we're going through right now, that I would talk tonight a little bit again about how do we find some peace in the midst of so much chaos, right? And I wanted to share this quote that I found from the writer Janine Marie, which I think captures a question maybe many of us might be asking ourselves right now, and really, again, applies to any time in our life, not just this time. She asks, how do we hold both the magnificence and tragedy of the world as if we stand at the threshold with Janus, the Roman god of beginning and endings, looking in two directions? How do we find the way if we can't see around the bend? In our time of disturbance and radical change, we are crossing a threshold, a portal, or an unseen bridge from one world to another. It could be said that the bridge is either collapsing beneath us or being made as we walk together. And I just think that's such a good reflection, especially that last part, which is really asking us, in essence, to consider how we're relating to whatever's happening in our world, or in our own personal lives. Is the bridge collapsing, or is it being made as we walk? You can think about your own life, or maybe it's both. Or maybe a bridge needed to collapse before a new one could be created, right? And maybe more importantly, we might want to consider, how do we discover a sense of calm and balance and ease in the midst of what might seem like a lot of chaos or even destruction? And what I find so helpful about this question is that the entirety of the Buddhist teachings are aimed at addressing that question, right? As the Buddha so wisely reminded us, everything has, is, will, and continue to be in a state of what appears often to be chaos. But it's actually just a never-ending process of beginning and ending again. Right? It's never ending. We ourselves, of course, are also constantly changing and every single moment. Some of my friends here haven't seen me for 10 years. There's change, right? I look a little different. And we can all actually notice this right now by paying attention to our breath in this moment. This too is constantly beginning and ending. And in every single moment, again, we're either receiving a new moment or breathing out, letting go. And the breath reminds us of that every moment. This past year, for many, many different reasons, I've really been leaning into one of my favorite teaching phrases, which comes from one of my favorite teachers, the German monk and scholar Bhikkhu Analayo, who has basically summarized the entirety of the Buddhist practice in 4 words. You ready? You can hear this and then go home. This is really the Pali Canon condensed down to its essence. You can see it on my car. People made me bumper stickers. I love it so much. The words are keep calmly knowing change. See a lot of nods. You all know this. I'm singing to the choir. Keep calmly knowing change. And I recognize that that might really sound too simple, but as we all know in practice and in reality, it's not that simple at all, right? Because what it's asking us to do essentially is to be continually mindful or aware of the truth of impermanence, or anicca in the Pali language. And we're being asked to do this calmly without becoming so anxious about all of the things in our lives or out in the world that are constantly changing. And of course, one of the main reasons this is not at all easy is because according to the teachings and just our experience, change or impermanence is one of, if not the main source of our stress and our fear. Okay? Like we might even just think about this. You know, you might even think about a time when there was a good change in your life, right? Maybe a marriage or a baby or a new puppy or a job change or a move. Good change. But there's an actual name for this, which has the word stress in it, which is eustress, EUSTRESS, which means we often don't remember or realize that those things too can be incredibly stressful. A dear friend of mine and her husband actually just bought a new house, and I anticipated and they anticipated that they would be just thrilled about this. But they're more stressed than I've ever seen them in their lives about buying this new house. So they're experiencing eustress. About 10 years ago now, I was up in Massachusetts in December, where I go for kind of an annual 2-week private retreat. And while I was up there, I ended up coming up with my own practice for Bhikkhu Analayo's phrase, which I still use today because it's really helpful to me, and I want to share it. But for me, that time happened to me another time. It was just a lot of change going on in the world and in my own personal life. And instead of calmly knowing change, I find myself, I was completely and utterly resisting change on all levels. And so what this meant was that I was also experiencing a fair amount of fear and uncertainty, because as we all know, whenever we resist change or we resist the truth of impermanence, we tend to have a corresponding amount of fear, right? Because the two are really linked. And so when I recognized what I was doing and how much resistance I was having, I came up with my own mantra or affirmation for myself to help me practice. And this was simply trying to remember to say to myself, may I calmly welcome change. May I calmly welcome change. Did you already have a reaction about that? Right? Maybe. This did not mean that I was approving of many of the things that were changing in my life or the world. I want to make that clear. I was simply inviting myself to welcome the reality of change, the truth and inevitability of change. And so to bring up yet another phrase, which comes from the Zen tradition, I was really honoring this traditional refrain, which is also very simple, which is, this is it, which I say so often. One of my managers had it tattooed on her leg. This is it, which inevitably is followed by another 2-word phrase, which is simple, which is now what? This is it. Now what? What's the wisest, most compassionate action now? What is going to help me here to keep my heart open? What's going to be the most helpful for myself and others, right? How am I relating to this is it? This is it. So it's not that we don't have goals or don't take any action. Of course we do. The problem is that we tend to resist the this is it sometimes fiercely. Anybody right now, right? We tend to want to argue with reality, either by running away, fighting like hell, blaming, or just trying to ignore and numb it all out. These are some of our strategies. Other times, the way we argue with reality is we paint a smiley face over it. You know, some of us have that tendency, which, as we all know, does it work? Does that ever work? Right? It's like trying to throw flowers on top of a stinking pile of dog, you know what, right? It doesn't really get rid of the smell. It's just trying to deny that the dog, you know what, is there. So having said that, I do fully recognize that change can often, even maybe right now, just seem so overwhelming. And maybe we do need to just stick our heads in the sand for a little while, just to help us to cope with some very big change. And that can actually, I just want to say, sometimes be a wise and compassionate choice for ourselves. Just like, not right now. I can't. But if we do this, we want to make sure that we're doing it consciously instead of just automatically tuning out and then just not tuning back in again, because that's never good in any way for either ourselves or other people. Because unfortunately, whenever we do this, when we resist what is happening, we are in essence hardening our hearts by locking in whatever emotion we're not allowing ourselves to actually feel. This is such an incredible, crucial part of our practice, this allowing. Maybe it's the biggest one, right, in my view, which relates to that retreat I was on again. So I thought the word welcome might help me to practice that allowing, because it's the polar opposite of the word resist, right? So I thought it might help soften my heart rather than harden it. Because another truth is we really just don't know what's going to happen next, do we? Or what can happen when we courageously open up to or welcome change or uncertainty. We just don't know what's going to happen. The writer John O'Donohue writes, "In parched terrains, new wells are to be discovered." In parched terrains, new wells are to be discovered. Or Theodore Rothke tells us, "In a dark time, the eye begins to see." In a dark time, the eye begins to see. And so every day while I was on that particular retreat, the morning bell would ring at the ridiculous hour of 5:30 a.m. Not a morning person. But when the bell would ring, I would start my practice with my very first breath when the bell rang with, "I calmly welcome change. I calmly welcome change." And for the rest of the day, I would practice using it for every single change that I noticed to help me to stop fighting and resisting so much. And as with everything in practice in the beginning, I knew to start with what seemed relatively easy to build or strengthen my mindfulness muscles, or maybe my letting go skills, if you will. And so the first thing that was easy to pay attention to was the weather, right? And noticing how I wanted the weather to be. So, for instance, I remember walking on a particular sidewalk outside each day and noticing like each hour how different it was. And so it was Massachusetts in December, right? So, I noticed that one morning there was rain, and then there was ice, and then in the afternoon there was snow, and then the snow was melting. Like just that easy. Just I calmly welcome and notice change. Each time I walked the path, I would try to notice like little sticks and branches and the leaves that had gathered there and how they had moved or shifted from the last time I visited and maybe melted in the ice. And each time I would say, "I calmly welcome change." Easy, right? Then I started focusing it on my thoughts and my fears and my emotions. So whenever I thought about things like my finances or one of my difficult relationships or climate change or some political fears I was experiencing, I would repeat the same mantra: "I calmly welcome change." And as you might imagine, that wasn't easy. What I experienced at first was a gigantic hell no. I, I do not welcome this change at all. And I did not feel calm about it either, definitely. I was often frantically trying to resist it and noticing that what I wanted was order and familiarity and a sense of safety. I also noticed that I had a serious toxic case of what are called the shoulds, you all know about probably. As in, he shouldn't have, she shouldn't have, shouldn't have, I shouldn't have, this shouldn't be that way, that should be different. And the very worst, I should somehow be different, right? As I often say, I was shooting all over myself, which is really unpleasant, And each time I noticed that I had shooted on myself, I also noticed how everything had gotten really tight and closed off, my mind and my body, and especially my heart. But as the retreat continued, this noticing itself actually started to help me to wake up to my resistance, and help me to make an even stronger, more conscious effort to remember to be mindful of change and to calmly and compassionately welcome all of it, to open up to everything, including my resistance, my fear, my sadness, my grief, to let all of it just flow through me without fighting it so much. And especially, this is the hard part, maybe, without judging it so much. And so doing this for a week or so, eventually this did help me to open and soften and truly become more calm and accepting of, okay, this is it. Now what? And again, as I said, this was all day, every day, doing this practice for several weeks. It was not easy, which is why it's called a practice. It's something we continually ask ourselves to do. As Bhikkhu Analayu suggested, we keep calmly knowing change. She didn't say maybe every once in a while when it's convenient, you might notice that things have changed, or when it's that really big thing. It's a continual remembering. That's what we're aiming at. And it's such an incredibly important teaching. As we have all experienced, I'm sure, whenever we're surprised or hit strongly by change, or maybe punched in the gut all the way down to the ground with change, it can often be extremely difficult to discover our balance, right? Or discover that sense of calm again, or even discover our heart again when there's that big of a change. But as the teachings show us, it's vitally important that we continue to use this practice to try to keep calmly knowing and even welcoming change, instead of letting the constant flow of change kind of sweep us out and under, away from our wise, compassionate, good, awake hearts. There's a great line in a song from the late, great musician Leonard Cohen that I love to remember, which is, if you do not become the ocean, you will be seasick every day. Isn't that a good one? If you do not become the ocean, you will be seasick every day. Just looking at time here. So sometimes, many of you may know that I originally trained more than 35 years ago at Naropa University, where I was studying the Tibetan practice back then. And in that tradition, there are a list of slogans that we're asked to memorize and use as a way of training the mind. And these are conveniently called lojans, which sounds like slogans, so it's easy to remember, lojans. And so tonight I wanted to offer you two of them. Can everybody still hear me? I want to offer you two of them that help with working with change and discovering more peace. And these two are, if you can practice even when distracted, you are well trained. The second one is weird. It's weird sounding. It says, always maintain only a joyful mind. Always maintain only a joyful mind. So they sound different, but they actually go hand in hand because they essentially mean the same thing. So that first lojang, if you can practice even when distracted, you are well trained, is meant to remind us to actually use the distraction or the change or the disappointment or the pain or the fear to awaken us to the present moment, right? And it's described as similar to how a horse might right itself after losing its balance, right? we use that. So being well trained describes how we can kind of catch ourselves or our horse, the mind, when it starts falling off over that cliff. We consciously come back again and again to the present moment, right? To the sun and the earth and the breeze, this moment as it is right now. We come back. This phrase also reminds us that whenever we find ourselves getting tangled up in our stories, especially all our stories about fear and worry or remorse or grief, we can always find that place of calm again by simply coming back home right now to this moment as it is, even if our hearts are breaking. Even if our hearts are breaking, we can find that calm. My very favorite Buddhist nun, again from the Tibetan tradition, Pema Chodron, tells us this. Pema says, to stay with a broken heart, with a rumbling stomach, with the feeling of hopelessness and wanting to get revenge, that is the path of true awakening. Sticking with that uncertainty, getting the knack of relaxing in the midst of chaos, learning not to panic, this is the spiritual path. Right? Learning not to panic. So this lojong of practicing while distracted is also urging us to use, again, that distraction of the chaos, the change, the suffering, to remember to practice offering great compassion to ourselves and to all other people who are struggling with the same exact thing. Okay? And the idea here is that as we learn to keep our hearts open to what's here and right now, what we discover more and more is the sense of, I'm not alone, which is a comfort to our greatest and deepest source of suffering, which you're all nodding. You know what that is. It's a sense of separation. That is our deepest source of wounding. And in this moment in our history, I think so much of our suffering right now that we're experiencing is our sense of divisiveness, right? Being other than, separated from one another. You know, we're in so many ways just afraid of one another right now. It's very painful. And so when we can make a more conscious, mindful effort to connect with all of those who are also suffering or feeling afraid, which is truly all of us, right? We're all feeling afraid on some level. It can help us to feel more calm and expansive. It can open our hearts to a sense of connection. Okay? Once heard us described as the walking wounded. And I just think about that whenever I'm with people, like it's not just me, you know, that's suffering. So the second lojong, always maintain only a joyful mind, is basically asking us to remember that our level of suffering almost always depends on how we're relating to whatever's happening, even when we have no control over or we can't change a situation. Okay? So, for instance, we might ask ourselves, how do I react or respond or find balance when I believe that the bridge is collapsing? Just a query. How do I react or respond and find balance when I believe the bridge is collapsing? This lojong is also meant to remind us that if we can regard everything that arises, no matter what it is, as fuel to kind of wake us up, we can actually then again remain calm even in the midst of the chaos. And there are several traditional teaching phrases that point to this, and many of you may know these, but one of my favorites is simply, may this suffering serve awakening. I'm using that one a lot lately. Could put damn in front of it and it makes it better. Damn, may this suffering please serve awakening. It's really that sense of, please, may I bow to this challenge or this fear. May I bow to it. Because the truth is, if we can stay with it, if we can welcome the pain or discomfort, the fear, the grief, the anger, whatever it is, that is what's going to ultimately transform us and maybe transform others around us as well. if we can, like Pema said, we can stay with it. Another one of my teachers, the great Joseph Goldstein, is famous for using another wonderful forward phrase that, in my opinion, really points to and honors our deepest intention for practice. I love this phrase so much. He says, "Don't waste your suffering." Isn't that good? Right? So, like, you can see him. Don't waste your suffering. Use it. And if we think about it, our intention for this practice is really always and forever, please, may this difficulty open my heart and soften it rather than harden it, please. And I'm just looking at time. So this is really where our daily practice on the cushion comes into play. So when we're meditating, we're practicing to become aware of what's happening, right? The thoughts and the emotions that are arising with kindness and compassion, but without necessarily believing those thoughts as true or acting upon them. Again, we're learning to simply rest in the awareness of whatever's happening. And that resting place itself is calm because it's not affected by the swirl of whatever's happening. The resting place itself is calm, the awareness. Right? So, for instance, we might notice that whenever we're experiencing a sense of chaos or worry, fear, anger, right, about something, there's almost like a sense of a fire in the mind, isn't it? Like we might think of the word hot-headed. It's almost really physical when we're caught up in it. And as we all know, one of the things that we're very actively cultivating when we meditate is a sense of calm, the calm within the storm of all of it. And traditionally, Kuan Yin, the bodhisattva of compassion, she's almost always shown holding a vase that represents the cooling waters of Passaddhi, which means tranquility. And if you're ever on retreat with me, I have a big gold statue of her. I put it right in front of me, right? So she's with me and I can see that and be reminded of that. In the teachings, it's said that the way that we cultivate Passaddhi is to practice three things: a sense of calmness, groundedness, and spaciousness. And I want to just very briefly review. This was a 45-minute talk, so I might skip over, so I hope you'll forgive me. But before we get into this, I really want to emphasize maybe the most important thing to remember, if you don't remember anything else I've said, is that the cooling waters of Passaddhi or tranquility are held in the arms of compassion, right? Think of that little vase and then it's being held by the arms of Kuan Yin. It's held in the arms of compassion, meaning compassion is the most vital element. It holds all of it, okay? In fact, we can bring compassion in even before we start practicing by consciously listening to our own hearts and recognizing or acknowledging that we're stressed or that we're hurting or that we're afraid. And honestly, that's not always the easiest step, is it? To offer this kind of compassionate acknowledgement to ourselves, to see it. But it's like we want to be able to say to ourselves something like, "Oh, honey," or "my friend, this is hard," or "this is really stressful." And then to not push it away or change it or judge it. It's just a simple, tender recognition as well as a kind of deep listening to yourself, to your own heart. Okay? Once we've kindly acknowledged and recognized that, then we might literally stop, take a few deep breaths, maybe all the way down into our belly, right? And sometimes just that, oh, honey, and taking a breath, with a sense of compassion and deep listening to our mind and body and heart, can often invite us to finally feel whatever emotion we've been avoiding. And by the way, it happens with other people too, when you listen to other people that deeply, even one breath to allow them to feel and listen. So of course that might include tears, which in the practice are truly welcome and encouraged because we want to be able to release them. The great Ajahn Chah, who was the teacher of so many of my teachers, once famously told us, if you haven't wept deeply, you haven't begun to meditate. If you haven't wept deeply, you have not begun to meditate. It's true. And so after we've allowed ourselves to stop and be with ourselves, then as best as we can, we make an effort to consciously let go of that narrative or story about whatever's creating the emotion within us in the first place. And as a reminder, one of the best ways we can do this is by placing all of our focus and intention on the breath, which can help us in so many ways, right? Especially letting go of our narrative that's fueling those negative emotions. Once we've placed a focus on the breath, we might then focus on the body as a whole. And again, just as we did with meditation tonight, we consciously drop all the holding and tension, squeezing resistance. We drop our shoulders, let the eyes be soft, tummy be sweet, soft, we open, okay? Then we might also sense our groundedness, dropping everything down to the earth, remembering our innate connection to the earth, which is always holding us. And remember that we all belong to the earth. We all belong. After we've connected with those two practices, which is calming ourselves and grounding ourselves, when we're ready, maybe more steady, we can then focus on that sense of spaciousness. And here we might start by imagining letting go of what Tara Brach often calls our limited sense of self, our small spacesuit idea of the body. And we imagine a field of space extending beyond the body, as wide as our energy needs it, maybe the whole cosmos, right? And this is important because, again, we want to really, truly remember that we're not alone and that we're not separate, right? We can remember that each and every one of us suffers, and not a single one of us is immune from suffering. As we continue with this sense of spaciousness, we can then start to watch our own minds and thoughts, again, with compassion and curiosity as a non-judgmental observer. And maybe try to remember another great teaching phrase, which I love, the bumper sticker kind of phrase, but it works. And I use it a lot, which is don't believe everything you think, right? Don't believe everything you think. Some days it's like, don't believe anything you think, right? And that honestly might be another whole summary of our practice. Don't believe everything you think. And for me, there are a few great teaching phrases from the Zen tradition that I find really helpful when I'm trying not to buy into everything my mind is convincing me is true. And again, they're really simple, and you could write them on a sticky note, and you might notice that I offer a bunch of those. I call them Buddha's sticky notes, and I use them because they're great mind training because you'll remember them. So if any of these resonated, write it on a sticky note and put it somewhere where you'll see it because it pops up when you most need it, honestly. So I'll give you these Zen phrases about questioning your mind and thoughts. I use them daily. They're so simple. Maybe so, maybe not. Maybe so, maybe not. We don't know. Not always so, which is a great one because we're always that way. It's always going to be that way. And we just know how it's going to be. We know how we're going to show up or how someone else is going to show up or how the situation is going to be. And then there's a third one, which is my favorite, which is what if nothing's wrong? And I just want to say that last one can be tricky, right? And the way I like to think about it is that even though something in our world or even in our own personal lives might truly in some way be wrong, that's wrong, right? The feelings that we're experiencing are never, ever wrong. You guys get that? The feelings that we are experiencing are always absolutely real. They're what are right here, right? They're what is happening, but we tend to judge them. So they deserve both our compassion and our attention. and our acknowledgement that they are real. Okay. So often, what helps me to remember this comes from a famous phrase again from the great Brene Brown, who told us simply, what we don't need in the midst of struggle is shame for being human. What we don't need in the midst of struggle is shame for being human. Okay. So I think looking at time, I will end there. I was going to offer you a brief meditation. Um, Actually, well, I guess maybe I can. You usually end with Q&A, or I could offer you a brief meditation. What would you like? Yes? Yes? Okay. Good. All right, good. So we'll do that. Before we do, since you've been sitting, why don't you go ahead and just stretch for a minute? Whatever you'd like. You can stand if you'd like. Yeah, so as you're ready, you can go ahead and close the eyes. And you might right away bring that sense of metta in. If it feels okay to you, you can place a slight smile at the corner of the eyes and the lips, remembering you're not covering anything over ever. You're simply inviting in kindness, gentleness, friendliness, a sense of, I'm right here. I'm right here. It's okay with whatever is happening in the mind, body, or the heart. I'm right here. And then see if you can allow the body to feel held by that sense of caring so that you can really let go. Like a baby being held in the arms of its mother, you just relax. Let yourself feel held in that sense of metta. You might notice the hands, see if you can open the palms. So inviting that sense of receiving and letting go so that you're opening and allowing whatever's here to be here, just allowing, no judgment. If you haven't already, getting in touch with each inhale and exhale, sensing the body real and alive here in this moment. Each exhale, maybe letting go, a little more opening. And as you're ready, you might think of maybe different changes, maybe in your personal life or out in the world. Anything that's calling to you that you're maybe struggling with. Some kind of change. And if one seems predominant, see if you can allow that in and notice your resistance. Notice how you've been carrying this struggle with this change. No judgment, just how does it live in the mind, maybe in the body, the heart. If it's helpful, you can always place one hand or both on the heart, or one hand on the heart and one on the belly, just to really get in touch with the body and the heart. And to give yourself that listening care. Like someone's really listening to how much you've been struggling with this particular change. You might even hear those words of, oh, honey, or my friend, this is hard. This is hard. Just allowing, like you might allow a friend to express how hard it's been. And as you're ready, you might try some of the phrases that I mentioned and just see how it resonates. So what happens if you use Bikyo suggestion for us, which is keep calmly knowing change. Keep calmly knowing change. See how that resonates. There, again, might be some resistance. Don't try to make it go away. Just notice what happens when you resist. Keep calmly knowing change. If you want to go a little deeper, you could try on that affirmation of, I calmly welcome change. No right or wrong answer. Just see how that lands. I calmly welcome change. Sometimes it can be helpful as a hand mudra to place your fear or your struggle in a fist at your heart, just acknowledging what a struggle it's been. And then with the other hand, to gently place the other hand on top of the fist. And then repeat the mantra with kindness. I calmly welcome change. Keep calmly knowing change. See if you can offer the struggle itself some kindness and compassion and listening. No forcing, just an intention. You might also try on some of the Zen phrases. What happens if you say to yourself, maybe so, maybe not, we'll see. Maybe so, maybe not, we'll see. Not always so. What if nothing's wrong? See what resonates. And finally, I'll repeat these words again from Naraya Wahid. You can just listen. You do not have to be a fire for every mountain blocking you. You could be water and soft river your way to freedom too. You do not have to be a fire for every mountain blocking you. You could be a water and soft river your way to freedom too. Namaste, everybody. Thank you so much. It's so good to be here with you all. I hope I get to meet some of you. Thank you.